Good morning, Stewart's Chapel. Brother Don Pierson here, and Don counts. We're still at the Harrises, and this is Wednesday morning. Now, we finished that, whatever you want to call it, okay? So we're starting back up where we should have started back on, I guess, Friday. And so I want to take you to Joel chapter 1, verse 19 and 20. And I want to let you know before I even begin to read, I want to see if you pick it out. There is a one-letter word here that screamed out to me. All my time of teaching on Joel and preaching on Joel and studying Joel, I had never caught that one-letter word. And when I caught it this time preparing, it was like, well, I even wrote down in my notes, wow. Wow. So here it is. So in verse 19 of chapter 1, O Lord, to you I cry out. The fire has devoured the open pastures, and a flame has burned all the trees of the field. The beasts of the field also cry out to you, for the water brooks are dried up, and fire has devoured the open pastures. Joel is very, very different than all of the other books of the prophet. In all of the other prophet books, the prophet puts himself into the scriptures a lot. I mean, he will say I or me or mine. He will make it's very personal about him. But Joel hasn't done that. And he doesn't do it either. This is the only place that I can find in the whole book of Joel where Joel, all of a sudden, it becomes personal. From the whole time, he's always talking to his audience, always talking to them, and he's kind of removed from them, even though he is a Jew, and he's going through the same thing. He's going through the same kind of dryness and drought and that which the locusts have eaten. He's in the midst of that, but he never inserts himself. It's almost like he's totally detached, and he's sort of like Elijah living off someplace by a brook being fed. He's disconnected from the drought. But it's not the case. Not until now does God say, okay, Joel, you can write I. You can tell them about you. He has called everyone else to prayer, from the priests to the drunkards, to everyone. He's called everyone to prayer. And then all of a sudden he says, and I am too. I'm doing it too. I will tell you that you would think that would be natural or easy. Through the years of preaching and teaching on prayer, there would be times when I would do a whole conference and realize that I have shared what they needed to do and what others were to do, but I failed. I was disconnected from it. Now, I'm not saying that Joel's disconnected, but throughout the book, it sounds like he's oblivious to what is happening personally. Then verse 19. I want you to know there are two types of people when it comes to prayer. There are those who always ask others to pray and never pray themselves. And then there are those who are constantly praying, and when they ask somebody else to pray, they're inviting them to join them in prayer. This one verse, verse 19, lets us know that Joel is not calling all the people of Israel to pray or do his praying for him. This one verse lets us know that what Joel is asking of others, he's already been doing it. He's been praying long before he gets to where he is asking others to join him. And that's the point. This type of person, they can pray alone, but they have no problem inviting others to join them in their praying. Sadly, more than one time I've had countless people ask me to pray for them. And several years ago, I started asking people a simple question, have you? Now, you would think that someone who is asking you to pray for them about something that they're crying over, they're weeping over, and you ask them if they've prayed, you would think that their natural response would be, well, how dare you ask? Of course I've been praying. But I want you to tell you something. I learned on that day that I started asking that question, I learned that most people who are in agony over a situation, who are asking other people to pray, most of them have said to me, no, I haven't. Now, there's various reasons. One reason is they don't think God's going to answer them. Second reason is they think God's going to answer the person they're asking. And in that case, they thought God would answer me before He would answer them. That's not the case of Joel. Joel is convinced of the power and presence of God and what God can do. He's trying to convince the people to do what he's already been doing. I want to ask you a question. When was the last time you honestly had a good, long, regular conversation with God about the drought in your life? I own a farm. And since I've owned it, we've had several droughts. Unfortunately, I don't usually ask for rain. Usually the drought has to get really bad before I do. God has used that example in my life to make me know that I'm really not much different than His people. Generally, it takes a lot for us to begin to really pray. Maybe you're going through a lot right now, and maybe it's time for you to stop right now. Maybe it's time for you to cry out to Him. Love you, Steers Chapel.